Good morning. It is Wednesday, April 15, 2015. This is your morning edition on I-24 News. Coming up later today, Iraqi Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi pays his first visit to the White House and appeals for more assistance in the fight against the Islamic State. Citizens of war-ravaged Sudan go to the polls in elections many claim are rigged to see Omar Bashir return to power. And later on the show, something lighter, or maybe not. Will it be a boy or a girl? Britain is buzzing with anticipation ahead of the second royal baby's birth. Good morning, I'm Yael Avi, and we begin with Iraq today. Iraqi Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi met with U.S. President Barack Obama in Washington yesterday, seeking more help in defeating the Islamic State militants, hoping recent gains in the fight will encourage more investment from a war-weary United States. Ahead of his visit, al-Abadi told reporters that the increase in U.S. airstrikes, weapons deliveries, and training has helped roll back Islamic State forces, but he needs greater support from the international coalition to finish them off, to quote him. Now, al-Abadi's first visit to Washington since winning elections last year comes at a crucial moment in the war against the Islamic State. The recapture of the Sunni city of Tikrit, north of Baghdad, has brought the war to an inflection point, and two major questions now loom for military officials. Where should the counteroffensive go next, and what more do the Iraqis need from Washington to press on? We are joined in studio by I-24 News senior Middle East analyst Ali Waqid. Ali, good morning to you. Also by senior intelligence analyst at the Levantine Group, Benjamin Decker. Benjamin, good morning to you.
Good morning.
And by our one and only, the director of the Moshe Dayan Center for Middle Eastern Studies at Tel Aviv University, Professor Uzi Rabi. Good to have you back. Good morning to you. Before we break it down, let's take a look at the following report about the meeting in Washington and break it down from there.
Iraqi Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi is on his first visit to Washington since taking office, meeting U.S. President Barack Obama Tuesday at the White House. The two are expected to focus on the ongoing fight against the Islamic State terrorist group. The Iraqi leader is set to ask Obama for an increase in American military support.
Number one is a marked increase in the air campaign and delivery of arms. This is vital. There has been an increase. That's noticeable, very noticeable. I'm thankful for that, but we want to see more.
The Iraqis are hoping to receive armed drone aircraft as well as Apache helicopters and ammunition, with payment being deferred. One Iraqi official was quoted saying a previously delayed shipment of F-16s is now expected to arrive in the summer. But it is not certain the U.S. will accede to these requests because of budgetary limits. The Iraqis have hinted, however, that if the Americans are not forthcoming, they will look to Iran for assistance. The Iranians have already provided crucial aid in the fight against I.S., particularly in the battle for the recently liberated city of Tikrit. Prime Minister Abadi is himself a Shiite Iraqi who has been walking a fine line drawn between Washington and Tehran.
Iraq is a diverse country, and Prime Minister Abadi has gone to great lengths to ensure that the diversity of the country is reflected in the diversity of the government and in the diversity of the security forces.
The American-Iraqi relationship is a charged one with a tumultuous history. The administration of George W. Bush attempted to justify the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq in 2003, not only with claims of weapons of mass destruction being developed by Saddam Hussein's regime, but also by drawing links between Saddam and al-Qaeda.
We learned more and more that there was a relationship between Iraq and al-Qaeda that stretched back through most of the decade of the 90s, that it involved training, for example, on BW and CW, that al-Qaeda sent personnel to Baghdad to get trained on those systems. It involved the Iraqis providing bomb-making expertise and advice to the al-Qaeda organization.
Saddam Hussein.
But in something of an ironic twist, the power vacuum created by the American invasion and the subsequent dismantling of the Iraqi army led to none other than al-Qaeda asserting itself as a major force in Iraq, playing a large part in the insurgency against Western forces. That insurgency was eventually overcome at great cost, with al-Qaeda in Iraq forced to recede underground, but the organization eventually re-emerged following the U.S. pullout, more powerful than ever, under a new name, the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant. Many of the group's senior commanders today were once high-ranking officers in Saddam's army, a self-fulfilling prophecy of the worst kind.
Also joined from Washington by Times of Israel, Washington, D.C. correspondent Rebecca Shimoni-Stroll. Rebecca, good morning to you.
Morning.
You and my esteemed colleagues in studio, I want us to have a listen for a second to what President Barack Obama had to say yesterday after the meeting with al-Abadi when it comes to assistance and the situation in Iraq vis-a-vis the help from the United States. Let's have a listen.
I think that I've said before, and I will repeat, we expect Iran to
have an important relationship with Iraq as a close neighbor. And obviously the fact that Iraq is a Shia majority country means that it will be influenced and have relations with Iran as well. And at the point in which Daesh or ISIL was surging and the Iraqi government was still getting organized at that point, I think the mobilization of Shia militias was something that was understood to protect Baghdad or other critical areas. Once Prime Minister Abadi took power, once he reorganized the government and the security forces, once the coalition came in at the invitation of and in an agreement with a sovereign Iraqi government, then our expectation is from that point on, any foreign assistance that is helping to defeat ISIL has to go through the Iraqi government.
Rebecca Shimoni-Stoyle in Washington, D.C. That's a very tired-looking President Barack Obama. God knows we in the Middle East supply a lot of things for him to be tired about. But let's talk about that meeting for a second. There is a wariness, I think, within the American public, and most likely also on Capitol Hill and in Washington, when it comes to assistance to Iraq. But the outcome of that, is there, how much is Abadi asking the American president for? And, is there an understanding, so it seems when we listen to the American president, that Iran is also needed within that battle in Iraq against ISIS?
Well, first of all, the question about the prime minister's request, his invoice, as one person in the office in the White House described it. Actually, the White House said that they had expected, or they had heard reports that Abadi was going to come with a very detailed invoice down to body armor and very specific items. And the White House is saying that they didn't get that invoice, and they sounded a bit relieved about that. But on the same time, certainly there have been requests made regarding airplanes, regarding drones. Right. It's not that Iraq is content with its current armament, and they do want the U.S. to boost them. And of course, they probably left fairly disappointed if really the extent of what they're getting out of this visit is $200 million in humanitarian aid, because certainly what they want and what they perceive themselves as needing is a little bit more actual ammunition against ISIS. Now, on the issue of Iran, there is some apprehension here in Washington. And yes, it did sound a little bit like the White House's statement said, well, what are you going to do? There's a lot of Shiites in Iraq. Iran is a majority Shiite country. So yes, Iran will have some influence. But at the same time, in the White House's own statements, mostly publicly, they did say that they are concerned that the influence of Iran cannot be undue to the extent that it eliminates the voices of both the Sunni and Kurdish people within Iraq. And so they're trying to tread this very thin line between acknowledging that Iranian influence exists and that it's significant and that it's probably not going away anytime soon, and the fact that they really do expect Prime Minister Abadi to be somewhat different than Prime Minister al-Maliki.
Than al-Maliki. And very, very, very valid points. And I'm glad, Rebecca, that you touched on the, the Iranian influence of, as President, let's start with this, actually, Professor Uzirabi, as we heard him, the White House spokesperson call Iraq a very diverse country. I think diverse is a mild understatement. When we're looking at al-Abadi and the Shia regime right now in Iraq, Iraq no longer exists in many ways. Am I right in saying that?
Exactly.
And in that respect, if the Americans do support al-Abadi, what, in your educated opinion, let's just look into the future for a second, what can become of Iraq at this rate?
Well, there is a...
Vis-a-vis Iran.
Yeah. There is a Kurdish almost independent state, and the Kurds are not going to get back to square one. So basically, this is, for me, kind of a state, even if it is not being recognized by the UN yet. But basically...
you think it ever will, though? I have to say, there's so much oil in that area. Will there ever be a free Kurdistan?
Well, maybe in Iraq there would be in the future sort of a federation or confederation or autonomy or whatever. But the Kurds are people. They are going actually to have their independence sooner or later. And basically what al-Abadi is trying to do is just to bolster his position And again, actually, whatever assistance is going to be channeled towards Abadi, this is something that is going to be interpreted by Saudi Arabia and others as bolstering their armed position in the region at large. And here is the dilemma, or here is the states that the cards that were reshuffled. The United States is going actually to help out Abadi and to strengthen Iran, but at the same time, they're going to help up the Pan-Arab Army who is fighting against the Houthis, which happen to be supported by
Iran.
And this is basically the thing that we have here. No more states. We have different dimension to follow. It is either minorities trying or vying for autonomy for themselves, or the Sunni Shi'i layer. This is what dictates the rhythm in the Middle East. And I think that superpowers cannot come up with grand design anymore. What the United States are going to do maybe is just to provide functional assistance here and there. This, in the end of the day, would serve to deepen up the already existing cleavages here.
The rift. Ali, I know you know what, Ali, you go first, because I can see that you're talking about it.
Professor Rabi, I don't want to repeat what Professor Rabi mentioned about the duality of the policy of the states, of the United States, supporting on one hand the Pan-Arab coalition in Yemen, and on the other hand supporting Haider al-Abadi and Iraq. That is supported and allies with the Iranian. But Yael, when the United States put pressure over the Iraqis in order to replace Nouri al-Maliki because of the institutionalized atrocities that were committed by militias close to Nouri al-Maliki, they hoped that Haider al-Abadi will launch a reconciliation process with the big Sunnite minority in Iraq. And what we are, and maybe having a prime minister that is less exposed to Iranian influence. And what we saw is two things at the Battle of Tikrit. The Iranian militias actively participating, and Shiite militias participating side by side with the Iraqi official forces. And the second thing is that the Iraqi government under Haider al-Abadi is even less diverse than it was under Nouri al-Maliki.
Even less diverse, which would be a problem. But Benjamin Decker of the Levantine Group, I want to ask you, because one of the main issues here, before we look also at the regional influences and fractures, is ISIS, IS, or whichever acronym they're called this month. There is a feeling regionally by some by several analysts, maybe you including, that there's a feeling, it sounds like in Washington, that ISIS cannot be fought against without Iran. That Iran is needed to combat ISIS in the region. Is that the case? And is that a card that the Iranians, I'm assuming, they're playing, obviously?
In a lot of ways, we've actually seen the rapid expansion of Shiite militias, not only protecting critical Shiite areas of the country in the south, but also joining active battlefronts. This happened in the Diyala province. This has happened in Tikrit. However, one of the most important things we learned from Tikrit was that the Iraqi government had asked the coalition airstrikes to target ISIS once they had lost approximately 7,000 Shiite militia and Iraqi soldiers and casualties, as well as a 2-week stalled offensive. So what happened was Obama said, if the Shiite militias withdraw to the greater environs of Tikrit, we will launch airstrikes. Within 2 weeks, the operation was over. In Anbar right now, we're seeing a massive offensive in Ramadi. And what's happened there is that the Shiite militias were initially deployed to various neighborhoods in the city. Abadi once again asked Obama for targeted airstrikes. The Shiite militias have withdrawn to the outer environs of the city itself. So while they are critically necessary in the sense that they fill bodies, they have better weapons, which are given by the Iranians, the coalition has made a very important point to not directly support the Iranian-backed militias in active combat operations.
In active combat, but there's still, it's the support of the same agenda in many ways,
isn't it? And the Iranians were there in the Tikrit fights. The Revolutionary Guard officers were there orchestrating the operations of the Iraqi army. This is one thing. And just to mention that 2-3 weeks before the big offensive in Tikrit, when Haider al-Abadi was negotiating whether the United States and the coalition will be supporting supporting the fights on the ground, and U.S. conditioned the participation in the withdrawal of the Shiite forces. He said that we can manage by ourselves to deal with the Islamic State, and if they don't want to support, we don't need their support. But finally, at the end of the day, it was obvious that without the support of the international coalition, this couple of hundreds or maybe couple of thousands of fighters of the Islamic State were capable to stop the advancement of the Iraqi forces, which showed that what said the president yesterday, that he discovered that in the last 7 months the Iraqi army was strengthened, as was better trained. I'm not sure that this is the case. And the most important thing that Barack Obama is still repeating and repeating, the idea of bringing democracy to Iraq, like the Americans did understand nothing in the last years, that this is something to be elaborated with the community. The issue, even the notion of democracy, should be redefined when it comes to the Middle East.
When it comes to the Middle East, when it comes to any region, I mean, democracy as the Western world know it, and I'm sure Professor Rabi will agree with me, is not something that can be applied necessarily in this region. But looking in this region, and specifically in Iraq, or actually Iraq and Iran, there's a lot of talk that it feels like the Americans have picked an Arab player, that they've picked Iran as the next big Arab player in the region. So there's this battle for an Arab leader to rise up. Can Iran be somebody that actually becomes the strongest? I'm putting the nuclear situation aside for a second.
This is the, I would say, the basic assumption that the Obama administration has come up with actually from the beginning. This is kind of a belief that I think that the Obama administration has held from the beginning. Iran is a pivotal player. If you have Iran with you, you can create kind of a more stabilized Middle East. I think that Iran is capitalizing on that. I think that Iran used that. I mean, the Lausanne Agreement basically is also based on the assumption that once you have an agreement, right, Iran is going to be much more friendlier, much more moderate. Iran is going to help you out in fighting ISIS. This is basically something which is not, I mean, I think that the opposite would be true. Iran has its own agenda. Iran is much more dangerous, by the way, than ISIS when it comes to the region at large. And I think that the Obama administration...
Go ahead.
No, what he said about Iraq, it is very, very simple. When Iraq was created in 1921 by the British, Shiites took it as kind of a co-production of both Sunnis and British to actually marginalize Shiites. Now, after 2003, Iraq is being taken as a co-production or kind of a plan or conspiracy by both Americans and Shiites by which to marginalize Sunnis. And this is what I'm trying to say. You can talk about democracy. You can actually come up with that time and again. Basically, what counts here is primordial identities. And if you do not internalize the simple fact that people do identify themselves in line with their primordial identities, not with the sense of nationalism, you're going to go one time and again actually making the same mistake.
And you know, I think there tends to be an agreement around this table when it comes to that. But just touching on Iran before we move on to the next subject, apropos Yemen. Yes, and I think everybody here in on this table, many people in the region, God knows, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu thinks that Iran is very dangerous. But, Benjamin Decker, I'll start with you. What if in the case that there is no framework deal, that Iran is not being put into the fray? Isn't that also dangerous?
Extremely dangerous. And, I wanted to just echo Professor Rabi's statements. What happened in Afghanistan when everybody came together across all the borders. You had the U.S., the British, the Iranians, right, all working together to try to stabilize Iran in the wake of September 11th. Afghanistan, yes. Right. And what happened was, over a 3 to 4 year period, we actually saw Iran exploiting that agreement and using information that it got from that ad hoc coalition to increase its control over the drug trade, to support and finance militias in the area, and further affect geopolitics in a very negative way. So we know that the Iranians have their hands in every pot of honey that exists in the region.
And so it seems, which also leads us to our next topic as we move along to Yemen. The UN Security Council adopted a resolution yesterday imposing an arms embargo on Yemen's Houthi rebels and demanding that they pull back from territory they have captured. Russia abstained from the vote but did not veto the measure, as was originally feared. Meanwhile, Iran, as discussed before, which is believed to be providing funding, weapons, and support to the rebels, proposed yesterday a peace plan for Yemen that calls for a ceasefire followed by talks, leading to the formation of a more representative government. Iran's Foreign Minister Mohammad Jawad Zarif said the Yemeni conflict was an internal one and suggested that the process be modeled after the efforts to rebuild Afghanistan following the 2001 U.S. invasion. Now, the move at the UN came weeks after the Shiite militias working in coordination with parts of Yemen's army loyal to former President Ali Abdullah Saleh seized swaths of the country, forcing government forces who are allied to the current President Abdel Abu Mansur Hadi to flee. So Yemen slid deeper into turmoil in the wake of the U.S.-supported and Saudi-led air campaign to push the rebels back, which started 3 weeks ago. And still with us, all my esteemed colleagues, Ali Waqid, Professor Uzi Rabi, and Benjamin Decker. Before we break that one down, let's take a look at the following report about the last several days in Yemen.
The United Nations Security Council is scheduled Tuesday to vote on a draft resolution that would impose an arms embargo on leaders of Yemen's Shia Houthi rebels and their key supporters. But a UN embargo may be difficult to impose, as Security Council member Russia is unlikely to support a move against its main ally, Iran, and will likely use its veto. Iran, for its part, is vocal in its opposition to the Saudi-led campaign to oust the rebels.
There is nothing of military value in Yemen to bombard. And that is why the entire 3 weeks of aerial bombardment by Saudi Arabia has been hitting civilian infrastructure.
The proposed UN embargo follows the Saudi air campaign, which, coupled with the internal fighting in Yemen, has pushed the Arab world's poorest nation to the brink of collapse. In a meeting in Madrid with Spain's industry minister, Mohammad Jawad Zarif stressed that a solution can only come from inside Yemen.
It's not a negotiation between Iran and Saudi Arabia. This is an intra-Yemeni dialogue. Yemenis have to speak to themselves. Everybody else has to facilitate.
Meanwhile, the airstrike campaign continues unabated, targeting stadiums and school buildings in Aden.
Now the situation has become critical. They are using the stadiums and schools as military storage, so we must not give them a chance to take advantage of them to reorganize their operations.
Underlining the growing humanitarian crisis in Yemen, Tuesday also saw more than 450 Sudanese evacuating the country, after the Saudi-led military intervention marked an escalation of the crisis.
Sadly, in the short time that we have left, Professor Rabi, I want to start with you. Why is Yemen something? Well, first of all, the bizarre thing about Yemen is that the Americans seem to be okay with Saudi Arabia, getting itself involved in the battle for Yemen while they're discussing against Iran, most likely, while they are still sitting down and discussing a deal with the good Iranians in Lausanne. But why is Yemen so important?
Yemen is a microcosm of the problems of the Middle East. This was the case in the 20th century, and this is exactly what we have now. In Yemen, we have everything. We have liberals in Aden, Al-Janub al-Hur. We have Al-Qaeda in Hadramaut. We have Zaydis and Shiites in the north. Basically, this is kind of a state that had been experiencing kind of a turmoil even before the Arab Spring. Those Houthis actually are trying to restore a one-time imamate, and they managed to capture Aden and Sana'a. They are supported by the previous President Ali Abdullah Saleh. But the thing is that Yemen has become kind of another spot where the extension of the Sunni Shiite Arab-Iranian rivalry is becoming much more relevant, and basically this is what we're going to have in the future. Yemen is kind of a ground where all these ambitions of, let us say, regional players are going to be very, very relevant. You take Bab el-Mandab, think of strategic assets. You know that this is kind of a process of a place that is pretty adjacent to the Horn of Africa. This is kind of a picture of a miserable state that is going to be fragmented. This is sort of another Somali, what we have in Yemen, but with all these, I would say, extensions coming from Iraq, Syria, in the line or in accordance with Sunni Shiite dichotomy and Arab-Iranian rivalry.
Almost in some ways, and Ali Walker, correct me if I'm wrong, it's slightly reminiscent of something we discussed yesterday. It's almost like Lebanon 40 years ago in some ways. But when we look into Yemen right now and the suggestion of Jawad Zarif of Iran, let the Yemenites turn out themselves, that's not feasible, and that's not what the Iranians really want, is it?
Yeah, that's not what the Iranians want. They want to see a government that is not maybe led by the Houthis, but a government where the Houthis and Ali Abdullah Saleh would have a bigger and more important say than they had under the Abd Rabbu Mansour Hadi government. I think nobody is taken not into consideration, but nobody is taken seriously. The resolution was taken yesterday in the Security Council. There are many channels and ways to bring and infiltrate weapons to Yemen. And Yael, the question is whether Yemen will be the point that will turn this indirect confrontation, this Cold War between Iran and Saudi Arabia, to the direct confrontation between these two giants.
And that is the danger, though, as we're looking at Saudi and Iran within Yemen, right? In Benjamin Decker, is that where can it blow up? Well, sorry, where can it go there than in Yemen?
What's actually interesting is that while we've had this UN Security Council resolution, I think the actual biggest news in this entire conflict, or let's just say for Operation Decisive Storm, is actually the appointment of Khalid Baha, one-time prime minister, to become the vice president. He has been viewed as a potential kingmaker in this entire conflict, and President Hadi was actually forced to appoint him by Saudi Arabia as a means of coming to terms with a political resolution.
Change. Okay, you know, time will tell, but I think fragmented is the leading word when it comes to the Middle East. This morning, interesting historical times. I want to thank everybody around this table, and obviously Rebecca in Washington as well. When we get back, a closer look at another war, this time, though, through an election lens. At the presidential and parliamentary elections in war-torn Sudan, what did they really mean, if anything? Do stay with us. First, though, let's hear some more of the morning headlines. I-24 News Morning Edition on this April 15th, 2015. I cannot believe I forgot the year. Thank you for joining us. It's the place where we say hello and good morning to Ami Kaufman, who doesn't only know what year it is, but also joins us daily to give us the news you missed while scanning the headlines. And yes, more on death, mayhem, and destruction.
Yes, good morning, Yael. It is 2015. We're going to do a little short roundup of the news on the Iranian nuclear deal.
As the clock is ticking.
As the clock is ticking towards June.
Yep.
First of all, before the deal, you know, it has to go through Congress first, the deal that Obama got. And
or
the
will
U.S.
it?
Or will it?
Yes.
The U.S. Senate reached a compromise on how to review this bill once it's written and once it gets to Congress. It's going to be a shorter period of time. It'll be 52 days.
Right.
And Republicans and Democrats agreed that 30 days will be given to Congress to review it. Then Obama has 12 days to discuss if he wants to veto it. And if he does veto it, there'll be another 10 days to override
the veto.
To override the veto.
Now, that's the fascinating. I think the question that we keep asking Rebecca, who's our correspondent in D.C., is, first of all, you know, I think he threatened quote unquote Obama that he wasn't even going to bring it to Congress, which he can do. He can do that. Speaking of, yes, he can. But
he's going to do it.
As Americans, I'm asking you as American. I think he has to bring this to Congress.
He has to bring this to Congress, definitely.
Okay, he can't. He can't even write it. Yeah,
he has to do it.
Okay.
Kerry, last week, Secretary Kerry met with the Jewish leaders and discussed the Iran deal and tried to convince them that this is a good deal.
Right.
And Obama just upped the ante and had 2 meetings with Jewish leaders on Monday, this Monday, in the White House. The first meeting was similar to what Kerry did. He met with the American Jewish Committee, the Anti-Defamation League, J Street people, AIPAC people.
The battle for the Jewish lobby.
There was a real battle going on there. And after they left the House, he went on to another meeting with Jewish officials. Well, not officials. These are what they called influencers, people that are strong Jewish leaders. One of them is, of course, Chaim Saban, a big donor donor to the Democratic Party.
Of Power Rangers fame.
Power Rangers fame. That's how he made his money.
Exactly. Power Rangers. It's kind of disturbing, though, that at the end of the day, the Jewish lobby's affinity towards Iran will be decided by the Power Rangers.
By the Power Rangers. That's it.
Yes.
I never thought about that one. That's good.
And
we're moving to Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Jawad Zarif, who had a few. Basically, he's asking Prime Minister Netanyahu, who seems, not really happy about the deal, why he doesn't understand why Netanyahu isn't happy.
And actually, he even turned to the cameras, Jawad Zarif.
Exactly. Let's see what he said.
So why Netanyahu so worried about this? If he believes that our nuclear program is an existential threat, then he should have a sigh of relief that now everybody is watching this program, making sure that it's not a threat. So for him, the resolution of this crisis is an existential threat. Peace is an existential threat.
You and I had this discussion off camera before this bit started, but in a very bizarre, cocky way, in a very bizarre way, it's actually Zarif, an Iranian, talking to Prime Minister Netanyahu.
It is. He's talking to him and asking him questions and wondering, trying to convince him that this is a good deal, that he should be for it. It is a new Middle East.
It's a new Middle East. Yeah. Peace. Now, but I think we'll be seeing a lot of this as the clock is ticking.
Yeah, towards June, we're going to have a lot of this stuff. And one last one on Iran.
Yes.
Prime Minister Netanyahu called President Putin of Russia to tell him that he's not happy about the lifting the ban on selling the S-300 missiles to Iran. Putin said, "Don't worry, these are only missiles for self-defense. You don't have to worry about it."
I'm calm now.
Yeah. And I think Bibi might be
less.
He's not calm.
Maybe slightly less. Okay. Yes.
Moving on to a story that is related to Iraq. You're familiar, I'm sure, with Blackwater, the private security company that.
Not only that, I'm going to be one of these people who talks about themselves. Mm-hmm. But when this horrific story in 2004, when the Blackwater guards were lynched in Iraq, I was actually covering it in Iraq.
Right.
So yes, I'm familiar with Blackwater in Iraq.
Well, then you obviously heard as well about the massacre, I guess you could call, that happened on Nisor Square in Baghdad on September 16th in 2007.
Yeah,
that was started by Blackwater people and killed 14 unarmed Iraqis. 4 of these guys went on trial and yesterday received sentences of one person received life in jail and the 3 others received 30 years each.
Right.
And they all agree, are convinced that they are innocent, that they have done nothing wrong. Even the person who started the whole thing he was a sniper who shot one man in the head.
Yeah, it's a bigger discussion because I think one thing that was fascinating about the whole or extraordinary we should use about Blackwater in Iraq, it's the outsourcing of war, because private basically contractors doing the job of a military. And then how does it end? It ends up in regular court.
That really started in the 2000s, and it really gained a lot of
traction. We outsource everything, even the military.
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Do we have time for some more?
Yes, one more.
Okay, one more. This week, Pope Francis said that the killing of 1.5 million Armenians in the early 20th century was a genocide, and that, of course, made people in Ankara, Turkey,
I was about to say, how did the Turks take to that?
They take too well. They recalled the Vatican ambassador
back to
and they had some words with him. But yesterday, Secretary General Ban Ki-moon of the UN. Said that he was not going to support those words from Pope Francis, said the killings are atrocity crimes, not a genocide.
Okay, we're going to stop for a second, you and I, and pause about the thousands, millions. How many died?
1.5 million people.
1.5 million, okay.
Right.
I think, whether it's unbelievable. Genocide or an atrocity.
Right.
Let's fight over that.
It's amazing how long this fracas is going on about the semantics about what to call the killing of 1.5 million people.
Why don't you just call it about 1.5 million people killed?
Right.
Yeah, there we have it. And sadly, all the time we have it, you're locked in the studio with me on this one.
I'm happy to be here.
Exactly, as we move along. Moving on to our next topic, amid widespread public apathy and calls for a boycott from opposition groups, polling stations in Sudan were open this week for an election that many believe is guaranteed to give President Omar Hassan al-Bashir another 5 years in office. The parties boycotting the election say a clampdown on the opposition, media, and civil society has created an impossible environment to run against Bashir, who has ruled the country since a 1989 Islamist and army-backed coup. Let's take first a look at the next report that recaps the latest from war-torn Sudan and break it down from there.
Outside polling stations in Khartoum, voters are optimistic. Many are making it clear their cross will go in current President Omar al-Bashir's box.
It's a national duty to vote freely. It's a constitutional right that I don't want to lose.
Al-Bashir has said in the past he won't run again, having been in power for a quarter of a century already. But now it's almost certain he will win, despite his indictment by the ICC for war crimes.
For those who say that the elections should be postponed, we say that the election is the right of citizens because they determine who their representatives are.
For many, these elections, with voting from Monday to Wednesday, are devoid of all meaning. Campaign posters lining the streets are almost all of al-Bashir. He looks like he's the only one campaigning. The opposition says he has the resources, the state power, and the ability to silence dissent.
We entered this electoral battle without any funding against a ruling party which has access to many resources. The media has very clearly been biased, and almost 90% of the time was helpful for the ruling party only.
It's not only opposition parties that are boycotting the vote, but people too. They say they have no one to vote for.
The elections this time around are different from previous ones, as there is no real mobilization of people and there aren't a lot of election activities like in the past.
Under al-Bashir's watch, rebels from the Blue Nile and South Kordofan states in the Nuba Mountains have taken up arms against the government, with many killed and millions displaced.
I don't know anything about the elections. I'm in a difficult situation after we were attacked and our homes burned and our livestock and everything else stolen. And how do they want me to take part in these elections? And I'm here under this burning sun.
While conflicts persist, the press is muzzled and the country suffers from corruption and international isolation. Much-needed national dialogue on reconciliation seems impossible. And for what it's worth, many Western countries agree. Norway, the US and Britain say an environment conducive to credible elections simply does not exist in Sudan.
We're joined live now from Europe by international spokesman of SLN Chairman Christopher Patrick Klein. Chris, good morning to you. To begin with,
good morning, Gail.
To begin with, I mean, these elections at the end of the day, let's call it, I mean, everybody's saying a sham. Isn't that the case?
They're absolutely a pro forma exercise. I mean, as your correspondent points out, the press, save for the state-run press, is completely muzzled. The opposition parties either are boycotting in protest or are banned. It's a show of theater rather than real electioneering.
Entirely. Now, when we break down Sudan and we look at this, you know, yet again, a war-torn, ravaged area that nobody's really discussing or touching in the media, sadly, unless something is happening, such as these elections that everybody's saying is a rubber stamp. But, you know, Khartoum is a long-time conduit, and I'm talking about this just because we're sitting here in the Middle East, of, you know, of passing arms to Hamas. Is there information, you know, is there linkages, despite the Khartoum, or, you know, is there any kind of linkage to other parties in this region that, be it arms are being flowing from Khartoum to them, or that they're conduits in that type of endeavor?
Well, given the larger arms relationship between Khartoum and most of its major arms suppliers, primarily Russia, Belarus, especially China, and Iran, if we then consider the Iranian connection, then yes, absolutely, there is a major linkage, and that linkage is to Hezbollah in Lebanon, of course, the revolutionary militant Shia group in Lebanon, right, which we largely consider as a political military organization. We're now seeing again in Syria its prowess as a fighting force. We think of it as also even a social welfare organization in the context of its Shia constituency in Lebanon. But what we often forget, and that the public knows little about, is that Hezbollah has a massive intelligence apparatus. This intelligence apparatus is at the complete disposal of the Khartoum regime. Not only is it at the complete disposal of the regime, it works actively with the regime. And in a rather sinister way, since we're in the 21st century and the battlefield is not only on the physical battlefield itself, Hezbollah has a key role with Khartoum as its leading cyber warfare organization. All of the electronic eavesdropping, the spying on dissidents, the interception of activity by the opposition, and other more nefarious, far more nefarious activities online. The web spooks of the Khartoum regime is Hezbollah.
And this alliance between Khartoum, because at the end of the day, ideologically speaking, they don't, they're not aligned similarly on the same agenda, but this alliance between Khartoum and Hezbollah is coming from where? Why, when it comes to regionally?
Well, it's a linkage. It's a linkage in strong part grounded in the relationship with Iran. And you point out there is a paradox. I mean, of course, the theocracy in Khartoum is made up of Sunni Salafists.
Right.
And so this is curious that they should be so strongly aligned with Iran, given that Iran and Saudi Arabia are fighting for primacy as the dominant Muslim powers in the Middle East. Yet we forget that Khartoum is the epicenter, one of the epicenters, has been a focal point for the past 25 years for sowing Islamist terror throughout the region, not only in the Middle East, but in sub-Saharan Africa, where it is especially active, and really just sowing mischief all around. You see Sudanese weapons, for example, which are clearly sent by the regime, whether they're weapons that they bought themselves or manufactured by their own considerable arms industry, showing up in conflicts in the Ivory Coast, in Somalia, in South Sudan, where Khartoum is clearly supporting its proxies in the tragic ongoing new civil war there. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, it is this clear linkage to terror. And even if we consider how Islamists have been spreading and growing their influence from North Africa, pushing down into the Sahel and sub-Saharan Africa, Khartoum is closely linked to all of this. So that
is the linkage. And sadly, in the minute that we have left, I'm going to ask you a theoretical question both you and I and journalists can answer very quickly. But still, I think the audience needs to hear, why does the world not care? Why isn't anybody doing anything about this?
Well, it's a very cynical thing. And one of the main quid pro quos why the West ignores the situation is that the West gets intel, a certain amount of usable intelligence from Khartoum on Islamist groups. Remember that Khartoum ejected Osama bin Laden when he was still alive. And this is the agreement. But with what Khartoum offers with the right hand, in terms of its support for radical groups with the left hand, it does 1,000 times over the damage that it is otherwise supposedly mitigating by its cooperation.
No, definitely, Chris. Chris Klein, sadly, all the time we have, but very, very insightful and valid information when it comes to these elections this week, as we mentioned, that have a much bigger picture than what's just on the paper. Thank you for joining us this morning. When we get back, something completely different, entirely so, because the royal baby's on its way. And come on, that's what we all care about, isn't it? But first, let's hear some more of the morning headlines. Welcome back. It is still Wednesday, April 15th, 2015.
Yes.
Okay. It's awful. I do not know what year it is. This is still the morning edition. I am still Yael Avi. Ami is still Ami Kaufman.
I am indeed.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. And we are moving along with this next hour of the show because this is where the real news starts. Now, the global guessing game over the expected new arrival of the British royal family, it could be any day. Lots of folks are betting on whether baby number 2, yes, we're talking about Will and Grace, but baby, not Will and Grace, Will and Kate.
Will and Kate, right.
I'm awful. Yeah,
at least you got the year right.
I got the year right. Will and Kate of British fame, yeah, the prince and the princess, expecting baby number 2. Will it be a boy or a girl, as well as what will the child's name be? I'm assuming not Yael if it's a girl. But
never know.
You never know. Let's take a look at the next report and then break it down from there about the hysteria, the mania that's happening in Britain pre the royal birth. Let's have a look.
The countdown is on for the arrival of Britain's newest monarch. With baby number 2 due this month, William and Kate have kept mum about the baby's gender.
It'll definitely be a baby.
But that's not stopping people from playing the royal guessing game and placing their bets.
The royals and betting seems to go hand in hand. Everybody likes to bet on the sex of the royal baby, the name of the royal baby.
According to British online betting company Ladbrokes, if the gamblers have it their way, 21-month-old Prince George will be getting a little sister. The company's saying 82% of punters have their money on a princess. Could she be a redhead? Seems like a long shot with odds at 5 to 1. She's more likely to be named Alice, which aptly rhymes with palace. William's grandmother, the Queen, had an aunt named Princess Alice, the name Elizabeth coming a close second, and Charlotte also a hot favorite.
It would be quite fun if, you know, we had Princess Madonna or something like that, but I think it's very unlikely.
But wait, there's an underdog. Ladbrokes posting this ad on YouTube, a puppy race to predict the child's name, starring the Queen's breed of choice, corgis.
And they're off. It's a fast start from Boris. Here comes Camilla Victoria from the outside, but now it's Alexandra streaking away. Alexandra the winner!
As for boys' names, the popular picks include James, Arthur, and Henry. Bookies also taking bets on the baby's birthday, many expecting the stork to visit on April 21st.
Wow. We are joined from London, the UK, by I-24 News' Jonathan Satchadati, I-24 News contributor Jonathan Satchadati. And Jonathan, because I'm sure, you know, I think your mother probably did exactly what I did, which is what we saw in that piece. And before naming you, she had a dog race. But so, Jonathan Satchadati, first of all, come on, how excited are the people of the British Isles?
I don't care how excited they are. I am so excited that a woman I've never met is giving birth at a date I don't know.
Okay, no. Entirely so. But
You've got no idea how excited I am. This is a matter of national importance, more important than our upcoming general election. No, in all seriousness, of course, the royal family here is considered with much love, and people are very excited about this second child, known as the spare, lovingly, because it's the duty of the wife to have an heir and a spare.
Jonathan, it's called the spare?
The spare, that's how it's referred to. It's their duty to have an heir and a spare. This is the spare. But you will be pleased to hear that due to change in constitutional law, even if it's a girl and they then have a boy after that, just to keep things fair, the girl will keep her place in the succession, whereas before that law change, the girl would have slipped down to below the boy, even if she were older. So you see, Britain is moving with the times, at least.
I'm sorry. I'm going to try and compose myself. Definitely, there's modern feminism for you.
Exactly.
But when we're talking about, let's focus on the spare for a second. I'm horrified. I'm a second child. But when it comes to,
Hey, I'm the fourth. I mean.
Okay, so there's that. But first of all, baby George is what? How old is baby George now?
He's more than one now. I should have checked that. He's a baby, and we've got a new one coming. He's, sort of that big. There'll be a lot of memorabilia as well, which is also very interesting.
We have to talk about the memorabilia, because the one thing I remember about living in London, and that I'm sure that you are out there buying everything. What is already out there for the new baby?
Everything. My collection is actually just in the next room. It's too big to wheel across into the studio, but there you go. No, what we know is that there will be a coin released by the Royal Mint. That happens after the birth. That happened after Prince George was born. A commemorative £5 coin, I think they released then. And there will probably be the same. There was an official range of china that was released. Then, of course, there'll be all the unofficial tat, which gets released: tea towels, mugs, china plates, more or less anything you can think of. Baby grows. Anyone will cash in on the birth of this baby if they possibly can. So there will be baby-themed everythings. And, of course, there is actually a slim chance. So all this betting over when the birthday will be, she lets slip, apparently. Those of us who watch her every move will have seen this. She lets slip to all the time. She lets slip to someone in the crowds when her rough due date was end of April, she said. So people are guessing around the 25th of April. Of course, if the baby's a couple of weeks late, as I believe Prince George was, it's quite possible that she could give birth on the same day as our general election. Can you imagine? I don't think I don't think we'll know what to cover on the news.
No,
really.
I will not know. And not, first of all, Jonathan, you will be on constantly.
That would be it.
That would be it. You would be only it. But no, it's fascinating when we talk about the betting, and before we touch on the actual important stuff, such as the name issue, if it's a boy or a girl. But when it comes to tourism, I mean, I'm assuming this, I mean, financially, let's touch on what the royal family is for England, because I'm American, and when it comes to Americans, the only thing we know about England is the Queen. You know, we're the first ones to admit it. But it's bringing a lot of tourism in, isn't it?
Well, the royal family does, you know, it is held in high regard by people all over the world. When you refer to the Queen, more or less anywhere in the world, the first Queen they think of is our British Queen, despite the fact that there are several across the world. So I do agree with you. There is obviously the issue of tourism and of also national pride. You know, we are, to put a serious note on it, proud of our royal family. It is a monarchy which has lasted and been very stable and provides, you know, still, when we had our parliament dissolved for the general election, the Prime Minister still goes for that audience with the Queen to ask her permission to do that. These are the formalities that still exist, a bit like your president in Israel or the president in the United States, but unelected, of course.
Yeah,
so,
I was about to say.
And with a little less power than the president in the US. Importantly, but of course, the royal family is still of importance, as you say, for tourism and for all the heraldry as well of the United Kingdom. So the succession and the birth of the heir to the throne's second child is of some importance.
I'm sorry, let's say it is a girl, just because I was seeing that dog race that we mothers do before we have a child born, to have them named. But I'm assuming if it's a girl, then, you know, the million-dollar question in this, I'm sure, is something you as a serious journalist investigated in depth, is, you know, will they name the girl Diana?
I think Yael is highest on the list, actually, in honor of their favorite news anchor.
News anchor and the first woman in the Bible to kill a man.
There you go.
Exactly.
I mean, that's important. No, but Alice apparently is the bookies' favorite. I'm not sure I will go with that. And then apparently Elizabeth, Charlotte, and Victoria are doing very well on that list as well. But of course, there's no indication that it is a girl. We don't know, if it's a girl or a boy. We can safely say it will be one of them, most likely. And at that point, they'll get into the tricky business of choosing names. They haven't been that imaginative before. The royal family do tend to choose from a stable of pretty solid English royal names, just like George. However, as the spare, they may decide that they can pick something a little more outlandish. So maybe baby Kylie of Windsor will be.
I think we just had Kanye West and the Kardashian chick.
Yeah,
Maybe it's North, or maybe, you know, West. Exactly. We have that. Jonathan Sachidati, this might be most possibly the most important report of your life. And I know, and we thank you for that in-depth look into the coming birth. You will be with us when it happens for its 6-hour special. So thank you. Front-raising. Thank you so much as we move along. And yes, Ami, I don't know how you can beat that.
That was a hard. That's gonna be a hard act to follow. Jonathan really did.
Definitely. And as again, I will mention, to people before we get into the viral spiral that is the Web Review, that you are married to a British woman.
I am married to a British woman. She's also following the story very closely, as far as I know.
As far as you know.
I don't think as closely as Jonathan.
But she's there. She's
there. She's in it.
She's in it with the British.
She's not betting on the names yet, but.
Okay, then we have to ask her. We have to.
Yeah, I'll ask her
Moving on to the spiral viral.
But we are staying with Britain, fortunately. I am ashamed to say I did not see the Oscar-winning movie, The Imitation Game. I don't know if you have, but
I'm ashamed
The Imitation
to say I
Game
did not. We have kids, Ami. We don't see anything.
That's the same reason. Okay.
Exactly.
The Imitation Game is about a mathematician and computer science pioneer who broke the Enigma code that was used by the Nazis.
By the Nazis, very famous mathematician.
It was the lead role was played by Benedict Cumberbatch, and he did very well.
I'm so glad you said Cumberbatch.
You like him, right?
No, I like saying Cumberbatch.
Oh, you can say it as many times. Like we have
Cumberbatch, yeah.
Anyway, this man's notebook, the one that he wrote his calculations in, was auctioned yesterday, and it was sold for over $1 million. Did very well.
That Alan Turing. Now, I don't think people realize, being a World War II buff, how important Alan Turing's role was in the battle against the Nazis.
They say that he basically won the war.
He won the war. Exactly. He won the war. So listen. If a notebook goes for $1 million, amen. Shameful how they treated him after the war.
As a gay man.
As a gay man,
they tried to treat him
himself.
for his homosexuality, and apparently committed suicide with some cyanide.
Fun times.
Very sad story. But the notebook sold for a lot of money. And speaking of money, this next story comes from the New York Times of a company from Seattle called Gravity Payments. It's a credit card payment processing company, and their CEO, their founder, decided that he wants to make the minimum wage now in the company $70,000.
Seriously.
Which is amazing.
That's the minimum wage.
That will be the minimum wage. He's working to get to that goal in 3 years.
Where do we sign up?
I don't know. I want to go. And Seattle's a great town to work too.
Seattle?
Seattle's really nice. A bit
rains
cloudy.
All the time.
A bit cloudy,
it rains
but
all the time.
It's happening. It's happening.
So, my God. Do we think that's going to fly? I don't care. Let's sign up.
It's going to fly. Right now, by the way, the average salary there at his company is $48,000. And the way he's going to do it is that he's going to cut his own salary of $1 million.
Oh, my God.
To $70,000. So he'll be getting $70,000. And he'll take about 75–80% of the company's anticipated profits, $2.2 million,
and
spread it around. His name is Mr. Dan Price.
That's a great name.
That's a great name.
That's a great name.
The price is right.
Price is right. No, but that's a fabulous, sadly, an anomaly amongst business people. But I'm almost sorry I'm married already. Yeah.
Yeah.
Never say never.
And we're off to Times Square. I miss Times Square. I love Times Square. But apparently it's a bit dangerous now because crime is back. No, Giuliani did it. He's not mayor.
Not mayor anymore.
Cookie Monster was arrested in Times Square for allegedly groping a teenager, a 17-year-old, that was in a tourist group, and he hugged her and put his hands on her breast.
Thingy. Yeah.
And he was arrested.
I always had that feeling about the Cookie Monster, didn't you?
That he was a little creepy?
That was a pedophile.
Okay. Well, you know what? It turns out, when I was reading this item, that this is not the first time that these guys in costumes have been doing it. In fact, in the last year alone, according to another website called The Gothmist, 18 people, 18 characters were arrested, including 2 Elmos, a pair of Iron Men, and several Spider-Men for shoving and pushing and groping.
And groping.
Yes.
So
this, the whole character thing isn't doing well.
My question is, do they attend trial in their costumes? Because I would like to see Elmo
the mugshot. I want to see the mugshot.
The mugshot of Elmo, exactly. Yes, moving on.
Moving on. I don't know if you see, the story now is about one of the most successful memes.
Which is?
Well, a meme is like a picture that's copied and circulated throughout the net with various adaptations and different captions that try to make it funny. This is one of the earliest memes around. It's the boy from what's called the Success Kid meme. I don't know if the picture is up yet.
No, we're seeing the picture. Yes,
if you're on Facebook and on Twitter, you have seen this kid at least probably a dozen times already with different captions on it.
Really?
Yes. And now this kid now is he's 8 years old now. And he just kind of came out into the public again because, unfortunately, his father needs a kidney transplant. And they're doing this kind of like a Kickstarter campaign. And since he came out, they raised almost all the money just because they're using his name.
His name. No, it's amazing. But essentially, this is like the birth of the meme was this kid.
Yeah, well, he was one of the first out there. One of the most famous memes out there.
Wow, okay.
I've used them numerous times.
And?
I kind of like this story. This is a girl, a teenager, whose father is an astronaut in the International Space Station. She really misses him, and she wants to figure out how to tell him that she loves him.
Right.
So she wants to put something on the ground that he can see and photograph from the International Space Station. And what she did is she made the largest, it's in the World Guinness Book of Records. The largest, actually it's the largest tire track picture. Saying that, and she wrote it it was done with 11 cars.
Oh my God, mesmerized.
Saying, Steph loves you.
Oh.
And her father saw it and took pictures of it from the International Space Station.
Yeah, that happens to us at home all the time. Not from say. That's okay. Heartbreaking.
Heartbreaking kitsch. Kitsch.
Kitsch, we love kitsch.
All right, I love kitsch.
We love kitsch. Thank you, Ami. That was it for this part of the show. When we get back, taking a closer and in-depth look into something entirely different that I don't remember. So stay with us. First, the news, of course. good morning, and thank you for staying with us and pulling through all the last 2 hours. I-24 News Morning Edition, the place you should be and start your day, because it's the only place that sometimes Shachar Pellet graces us with her presence. Culture correspondent.
Wow, what an introduction. How can I live up to that?
I was like, exactly. Now you're going to have to come back.
I'll try, yes.
Shachar Pellet, culture correspondent, I-24 News, one of my favorite women ever. I say this to everyone.
Yeah, I know.
Yes, I know. What do you have for us today?
Well, today we'll be talking about TED, not the bear.
No.
As some might think. The conference, the talk conferences. TED is, for those who don't know, a non-profit organization devoted to ideas worth spreading. That's how they call themselves. It was born actually 30 years ago, 1984, out of the mind and soul of Richard Saul Wurman's observation of how he can make a powerful convergence of technology, entertainment, and design, hence
And then
TED.
I'm just going to say, because this is my personal word, then it became a monster.
A monster.
A monster.
It's grown to support multiple initiatives. So we have the 2 annual TED conferences, and then there's TED Global, which started last year in Brazil. Then there's TEDcom.com, where new TED Talks are posted daily. The educational TED, TED Ed, TED Prize, and TEDx, which is the individual groups or local initiatives of TED organized locally, and this is what took place this week in Israel. But before I elaborate on the Israeli event, I have to say that in the fall of 2012, TED Talks celebrated its 1 billionth video views. Over 1 billion views of TED Talks, which is in this era explains how people thirst for information and knowledge. It's incredible. These talks are limited to 15 minutes, 18 minutes tops, and people really connect to these small, limited, very, very focused issues. The statistics show that the more scientific talks are generating more attention. There's artistic, musical talks as well, but they are less watched, they're less viewed. The most scientific talks, technological talks are those.
Liberal arts people are always, the minority.
But these include, from Bill Gates, Bill Clinton, the creators of Google. We had Sheryl Sandberg with a great talk from Facebook, Nobel Prize winners, Sting, Bono. So it's really a great variety. And here in Israel, it was the second time TED took place, TEDx.
And TEDx was here also in 2012, wasn't it?
Yes, it was like a smaller version of it. It wasn't exactly with Merav Michaeli, the famous speech about marriage. And this time, the emphasis was about the variety of the speakers with the Arab-Israeli community. They really put an emphasis and a focus on the different professions and also the different background of the speakers. But what is very interesting is that this goes for the audience as well. Only 850 tickets were able to be sold out of thousands, thousands who actually wanted to purchase. And the audience themselves was selected gender-wise, with their professions, with their age, in order to bring a variety in the crowds as well. Because we have to explain the different sessions of talks, but there's also ice-breaking sessions where the audience has a chance to mingle and network with the different
speakers.
Exactly, with the speakers and get more information and ask them questions. So it's also very important who the crowd is. So in this case, let's talk a bit about the speakers. So I think the most fascinating and interesting one was the Rabbah Iska Smith. A fascinating story. She's a Jewish educator and spiritual mentor, but she started her life out as an ultra-Orthodox man, a father of 6 children in the United States, and she brings out her personal, intimate story on stage in front of almost 1,000 people, and her story is incredible. She now lives in Jerusalem, so she also brought her aspect of the city, but also she brings the openness and the open-minded aspect of her life. She's now mentoring spiritually and guiding through Torah classical texts and also modern texts.
Obviously, obviously not recognized by the rabbinical courts in Israel.
Of course not, of course not, but she has this courageous journey that she decided to share with everyone, and she got such a standing ovation in this event. People were really astonished by her personal story and the way she conveys her message, which is beautiful. A very inspiring person. We move on to another very interesting speaker, Lihi Lapid, best-selling author and journalist, but also a wife of former finance minister Yair Lapid, but a really talented and creative person in on her own right. She has written 3 best-selling novels, a best-selling children's book.
She's a photographer
she used to
also.
be a news photographer, journalist, but she chose to talk about this in her talk. She gave this up once she became a mother, and her speech was focused on compromise, how it's okay to compromise. Not everything has to be perfect, and she takes in this aspect of feminine, of a feminine aspect. She goes back to her grandmother and the way people raise their children today, and she really says how, as you said, not okay, but it's really a must. To compromise, and how it really should be a part of life, and not everything has to be perfect all the time. So she really opened the mind in a feminine aspect on that. Once again, I have to mention that it was a very interesting collaboration with Arab and Israeli speakers. So we had Hani Alami, a CEO from East Jerusalem, speaking about high-tech in the Palestinian society, and this 25-year-old Palestinian, Rabia Zayoud, who he's an entrepreneur and has his own company for medical devices. So it wasn't only the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. It was very interesting,
which is a beautiful thing, as you just said. It's also success stories within the Palestinian community, not just touching on the conflict. Is something that people don't hear much about.
And finally, summing up the event was, we can call him an Israeli, but he's a very much international star, David Broza, the singer-songwriter, who...
Not only the singer-songwriter, the man who was sitting in the studio several months ago.
Well, good for you.
I know, I'm just saying.
What I loved about his talk was that it wasn't only a talk. He opened with a song and finished with a song, and between them, he's very much known for his how active he is since 1977, especially through peace initiatives, with his very renowned song "Yeh Tov." It will be all right. It will be okay. And he performed this song, summing up his talk. He has a new album, which soon a documentary about it will be released, called East Jerusalem, West Jerusalem. Exactly, where he collaborated with Palestinian musicians, and so he brought the story of how this came to life on stage. Fascinating, and once again, with the music combined with the talk, the crowd couldn't stop clapping their hands and cheering.
And, you know, the most hopeful. It's wonderful that things like this are by coming from the outside and being produced by, you know, an outside entity. The monster that TED has become. Nothing against it. I'm just saying it's like a monster.
It has become huge, but I think it managed to convey such important messages and reach international audiences. When I asked Iska Smith why participate in TED, she said, in any AP story I've done in the past, I've got dozens of emails and letters back from audiences. Now, after I know 2-3 million people will be watching this video, I know this will reach greater audiences all across the world, and this is what these people want. They want their messages out there. David Brothers says, I don't want to change the world, I want to change myself, but it makes a dent or a difference in anyone else's life. I've done my share.
Then he's done his share. Wow, hopeful, optimistic stories this morning.
Why not?
I know.
Why not?
I know, it finally happened. Because we started off with
We can call this the good news section.
Amen.
I can come every day with good news.
The ratings are going to go through the roof. No. Maybe that's what people need.
I think they will.
Maybe that is what people need. Amen to that. It doesn't necessarily lead if it bleeds. It leads if Shachar Peled smiles. So we've got that, and we're going to move to another smile on this optimistic, you know, bit of the show. That would be Tal Heinrich of Focus Magazine, I-24 News Focus Magazine, that airs this evening.
Yes.
You're right.
7:40 GMT.
7:40. And what is on tonight?
Not so optimistic, because we decided to focus on Kenya in light of the Garissa University attack on April 2nd, which killed around 150 people and injured around 70 people. So our first guest on the show is a local journalist from Kenya, from Nairobi. He was actually in Garissa when we talked to him. His name is Ian Wafula, and we asked him about the latest details coming from the investigation. So what he could tell us is that the government has offered a $215,000 reward for Muhammad Mahmoud, who is the mastermind behind this attack. So they already know who the mastermind is. But what they don't know yet is the identities of the gunmen and how many they were on that day in the scene. So, but they do know that 26-year-old Abdul Rahman Abdullahi was one of the terrorists, and he surprised many people in the country because he's not coming from the classic narrative of the members of Al-Shabaab recruits.
Right.
Exactly, because sometimes, we have this narrative in which, according to people are recruited to such terror organizations coming from bad backgrounds, poor families.
Not the case with him.
Not the case with him. He was the son of a government official. He worked in a bank. He went to law school, and that's pretty crazy. And what the journalist told us is that the people in Kenya now are viewing his story as a symbol of the radicalization of youth in Kenya,
of all forms of life. Let's have a listen, actually, to a clip of him of the discussion he had with the journalist out of Kenya. Let's have a listen.
The aspect here is to look at the impact or the side effect of what I would call good intention. Now, when we look at, for example, the Kenyan case, we're looking at a situation where the political pronouncements would be pointing out that the country can run its own show. But when it comes to serious challenges that affect the country, then you'll get the leadership again going out to foreign countries to seek assistance. And yet, the capacity can be built within Kenya to make Kenyans to be able to solve their own challenges.
So that was James Shikwati, an economist we actually interviewed, because, as you know, half of the country's population is living below the poverty line. The distribution of wealth in Kenya is very unequal, like other places in the world.
But in Africa, it's actually, the distinction between classes is horrific, when it comes to corruption.
But what's very interesting with James Shikwati, he's a local economist from Nairobi. And we know that different NGOs and also the United Nations are contributing tons of development aid, to Africa. And what he's saying is that this is actually causing more harm than help. This is what the soundbite we just heard.
Why is it causing more harm?
So he's saying because it's just pushes them away, of pushing themselves and developing themselves. We can, if we think about it, and many books were written about different immigration, ethnic groups that immigrated to the United States. So we know that the more the government has helped them,
that's his claim. The more the government helps, the less they have the inclination
the less they have developed themselves. No, I'm just saying, in the United States, we have researchers that show the same, but I don't know if it's valid in Africa.
I don't know if it's valid in Africa. It's all the whole, it's a big topical discussion that, many will argue otherwise. But in Africa, I think more aid is always welcome. The problem is the corruption, where that money ends up going at the end of the day. But yes, moving along.
Half true, according to James Shikwati. Anyway, and speaking of development aid and aid for Africa, so our next interview was a couple from London. They went on a visit, on a tour just to Mombasa in 2011. Gail and Paul Woods, that's how they're called. And this is where they saw for the first time the children lying on the pavements, busy streets, hungry, with nothing to do, just searching for themselves. And we talked to them because 4 years later, they decided that they will still be there and found their organization.
And they're there. Okay.
And they're there, and they told us about the everyday struggles.
Let's have a listen to what they had to say.
To survive, they do mug people. They do steal wing mirrors from cars and generally do cause problems. But basically, they spend the days when they're on the streets themselves, just wandering around. They look for food at the back of hotels. They beg from people. On the dump site, they wait until the refuse trucks arrive, and then as the refuse is being taken from the truck, they're routing through it. They look through for plastic bottles that they can sell, but they're also looking for food that they can eat.
So they actually devoted their lives to stay there.
Yes, they founded this feeding program, a daycare program, and also some family homes for abandoned children.
No, but it's amazing. I mean, actually, Chacho, you said, you know, good stories coming out of Africa. That is optimistic. That is optimistic.
Well, it's true, but it's always in the face where the Western countries or the Western communities come and help.
Come and help, I know, rather than from within. Yeah. Girls, women, colleagues, thank you for being with me today. That was it for us this morning. Don't forget to watch Focus Magazine this evening on I-24 News, and an in-depth look into Kenya. And of course, that was our show. Check us out on all those social networks, Facebook, Twitter, whatnot, and tune in tomorrow morning for another edition of The Morning Edition, the place you just have to start your day in. Thank you.